Okay.
So we stopped at the post office and got out of the car, and there was this guy, a hippie, coming out of the post office. So actually, in the letters to us from the various people and the people we met on the road, and I think even Judith had sent this letter, not only did it say go to Hinton, West Virginia, now I remember, it said you should go to the Island of the Red Hood. What? I had no idea what the Island of the Red Hood would be. I mean, it's like, this was a very mysterious sort of thing, and odd. You should go to the Island of the Red Hood in Hinton, West Virginia. So we walked up to this guy, on the street. I said, do you know where the Island of the Red Hood is? So he said, sure. He introduced himself. His name was Don Drummer. I says, yeah, I'm Don, I'm going right by there on my way home. You just follow me. I said, great. So he goes up this road, and it's the worst road in the world. I'm going following behind him. It was like all big holes, and boom, did it off this hill. And then there are bulldozers on the road coming down there. We have to get off the side of the road. I was like, this is where we're going. Turns out that was the back road. You didn't have to go on that road at all. You just chose to go on that road for some reason that day, and they were repairing the road. It was just like another sort of introduction to what life in West Virginia was going to be like, very primitive. It was kind of like Guatemala, And so we followed him up, and he took us to this thing, and he said, just go down that road, you get to the Island of the Red Hood. So we drove down this little road and came there, and it was like driving into Magic Forest Farm again. I mean, it was like the exact same place. It was like we were back in in Oregon at Magic Forest Farm. There were the same sort of buildings, and there were the same sort of people there, and half of them were naked and walking around, and I was like, boy, this is home. So we stopped and got out and introduced ourselves, and everybody came over and hugged us. And, oh, welcome, we're so glad to see you. And it's just so funny. And I remember asking them at some point. I asked them, "What does this mean?" I thought it was some mystical thing, the Island of the Red Hood. What is this? The symbol here? He says, well, you see over there, there's this old, truck hood that was lying on the side of the road when we got here. Right? This old red truck hood. So, seems to be that was the name. So we felt right at home, Shoshana and I, and we just kind of hung out there and got right into doing stuff with them, the same way we would do anywhere else, and talked a lot, and tried to find out, what the scene was in West Virginia, and, that told them we were trying, we were interested in buying some place and trying to settle down. Oh, yeah, well, and they told us the different possibilities, different parts of the state where we might be interested and stuff. And we stayed for a few days, and I remember I got poison ivy everywhere. I really got hit by poison ivy. The whole area was covered with poison ivy. And they showed me a treatment for poison ivy while I was there, which was to rub jewelweed, which was another plant, a wild impatiens, and that grows, in this part of the country. And they said, you just take this and you just rub it all over, and jewelweed grows wherever poison ivy grows. And the Indians always, whatever, the old timers always used it. So I rubbed it on it, and it did. It relieved the sensation, but it didn't make it go away, and it continued the same, length of time. But it did stop the itch. So that was something I learned there and shared with other people for many years. So guess we must have had to return the car, and then we came back to West Virginia again, and had to return the car somewhere like D.C. And came back and hung out with them. And at some point, this guy, somebody said, you ought to talk to this guy who has a piece of property, and I think he wants to sell it. So we went over and talked to him. And he had this 55 acres on the side of a hill. And he was a hippie. He and his wife were there. Maybe they were breaking up or something. I don't remember exactly. And he said, yeah, you know, I'd be interested in selling my place. And I said, how much you want for it? He said, yeah, I want about $5,000. 55 acres. He had a little broken down house, a little spring up on the hill, and a stream that ran below it. I said, fine, you know, we'll take it. He said, okay. I said, so let's do it. He says, well, before I sign the deed, before we do the deed, I need to find someplace else. You know, I'm going to go look for something. I have to find someplace so I have a place to live. And fine, you know. He said, in the meantime, you know, we would stay there. And he moved away, and we'd stay there. So we stayed there. I started fixing the place up, clearing the, you know, the field, and fixing up the house, and fixing the spring, and doing all this stuff, you know, just getting into the work. And we contacted him a few more times. Well, I'm not quite ready to sign the thing because I didn't find the place yet. Blah, blah, blah. I just kept working. And eventually I started thinking, there's something screwy here. You know, he either wants to sell it or he doesn't want to sell it. And it's like we're there for a month already, and he still weren't getting anywhere. I started to think, he's really not going to sell it to us. So we better be looking for someplace else. So we asked around, and people said, oh, maybe you ought to go to this other county, Upshur County. It was really nice, and blah, blah, blah. Go to Upshur County. So we took a ride up to Upshur County, and I guess we hitchhiked up there. Somebody gave us a ride. And I got a county map of Upshur County, and on the county map, every road, it had a dot for every house on every road, right? Showed everything. So I started asking around, you know of any place, any, farm for sale, property for sale? And people said, no, I don't really know anything. And so after this went on for a number of days, I was getting nowhere. I decided I would just go and walk down each road in Upshur County and go to every house and knock on the door and ask them. Right? And I'd cross off on my map every house that I'd stopped at. And I started this little project of doing this. I'd go to each house, and the exact same thing would happen at every house. I'd knock on the door, somebody would come to the door and say, yeah, what can I do for you? And I'd say, I'm looking for a place to buy, farm. Do you know of any farm? And they'd say, what's your name? And I tell them my name. I say, where are you from? I tell them where I'm from. I say, who do you know? I say, I don't know any. No, I don't know any place for sale. And I go to the next one, and they'd say exactly the same thing. It was like a recording. And after days of doing this, it's like, thinking, this is really interesting, right? This is a totally closed society where unless you're in, this is like trying to get a union card, If you're not in the union, you can't get a job. And if you don't have a job, you can't get in the union. And if you're not from West Virginia, you don't know somebody, you can't buy a house. And if you don't have a house, you can't know somebody. And it was like, stuck in the catch-22 here. I couldn't get past anyone. They all said exactly the same thing over and over. I was like, wow, that's astonishing. So then we went back to...
How many places did you actually go to before you realized there was no point?
Well, I continued even though I knew it was no point. I kept hoping. I might have gone to 100 places and finally just realized this is going nowhere. And, until I figure out how to break through, it was pointless. So we went back to Hinton, and I was doing the same sort of thing in Hinton, just asking anyone, what to do. And we stopped at this little grocery store on the road to pick up a drink or something. And there was this crazy old lady running the grocery store. It was her place. And started talking to her. I said, "Do you know any place for sale?" She said, "No." But she wasn't from there originally. We got talking to her. She's from Alaska. Right? She was an outsider, but she'd been there for 30 years. She's still an outsider, And she was a crazy old lady, And we got to talk to her. But she had been there 30 years, so she knew people and stuff. So one day, she called us at somewhere. We left a phone number at somebody's place where we were stopping by. And somehow we got a message. I don't know. I don't remember. I mean, I didn't have a phone. I didn't have cell phones or anything. Somehow I get a message that whoever, Virginia, I think was her name, had some information for us. So I got in touch with her, and she said, I think I found a place for you. I said, "Really?" "Yeah. You call Homer, whatever. Forgot his name. Tell him that Virginia told you to call." So I call him on the phone. He answers. I explain who I am. He says, "Oh, yeah, Virginia." She said, "You might have a place for sale." I said, "Yeah, I do. Actually, I have two places. I have a place, there's two places. I don't know if you're the kind of place you're looking for, the kind of way back out of the way, off the road." I say, "It sounds good." "That sounds good. I like that." Because, and there's no house. "That's okay. No problem." He says, "Well, I got two places. One's 36 acres and the other is 32 acres. And I said, "So, and how much do you want?" He says, "Well, I need $3,600. I said, "For which one?" He says, No, for both of them." "Sounds good. When can we see them? Right now?" Right? So he said, "Yeah, sure, come on." He says, you have to take the road up the mountain, so we passed the island of the Red Hood again, and go as far as you can, to the tippy top of the mountain, and you'll see my place right at the top of the mountain. And it's real West Virginia. He was like, the twang. So we drove
What
up.
did it sound like?
"Yeah, y'all come on up the mountain, top of the mountain, and you go down, such and such Hollow Road, and, the end of the road, you see a blue house at the end of the road. Just knock on the door." So we drove, we found his place, And he says, yeah, I got this place down there, It's down in the holler. I think I can find it, He says, "Yeah." He says, you come on with me. We'll see if we can go find that place." Like, you're going to go find it, you don't know where it is. So we walk over this, down these trails into the woods, and we're walking and walking. He says, "I know it's around here someplace, There's an old gate here someplace." And, we just kept walking and through the woods, like there was no indication of anything was anything. It was just wild country, And we're walking. All of a sudden, there's a fence gate, There's a little broken road, sort of, and a little gate. And he says, "Yep, come, go through this gate. That's where it starts. This gate is the." Yeah, he says, "Yeah, it's." And we just keep walking. He says, "Yeah, it's that whole hillside, and it goes down to the creek down there." We just keep walking, There's sort of a little road rambling through there, and then we got to this place where there was this old remnants, the remains of a log house that had been there. He started to tell us the story that the Kaleses lived back here, back in the Depression. He raised 12 kids here, and that was the old bean field over there, and there was the garden down there, and yeah, these cherry trees. He planted these cherry trees here, and you know, and there were these cherry trees that are 6 feet diameter cherry trees, huge things, more than 100 feet high. These huge trees.
100 feet high?
100 feet high. They were huge trees. Yeah. I mean, these guys are...
They grow 100 feet high, but only... Oh, 6 feet diameter trunk?
Trunk. The trunk was 6 feet in diameter. I mean, these were little trees that the guy had planted as, which should have been pruned and, kept. And instead, they'd been there since for 50 years, and they'd grown up a little. They were just these... It was like a forest of cherry trees, and they'd replanted themselves, and there were cherry trees everywhere. Just these big, huge trees. And it was like, wow, And then there was this sort of garden, and in the garden you could see there was rhubarb coming up still somewhere, some piece of rhubarb, and it was pretty wild. And I was like, and we kept walking forever.
Was Shoshana with you?
Yeah. We looked at this and I said, perfect. This is perfect. Where do we sign the deed? And we went down here to the lawyer and we bought the place, $3,800. I said,
where did you have the money from?
Shoshana had a little money.
Was
just about that much.
Was it signed just in her name or both of your names?
Both. Actually, it was just in her name. It was just in her name, I think. So she bought the place. So funny,
Both places, the 66.
Yeah, 68 acres or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we didn't see it all. I mean, we just kind of saw a couple of places there, and we walked back out of the woods to his house and got in whatever car we had at the time. I don't even remember how we had got a car at that moment. Maybe we borrowed one or something. And we said, wow, now we own we immediately went down to this lawyer in town. He drew up a deed and we did it.
Did you see a map showing where on the...
No.
Where your place was?
No. It was described as, next to the snow place, and, the corner starts at the end of some other place but with a stick in the ground and a rock, and then, 300 paces to the old oak tree, and you turn left, and that was the description of this thing, 100 rods in that direction and 3 paces there. Whatever. It was like, there were no people. We never saw a person walking anywhere while we were walking, through many other properties to get to this. It was just wild. It was just woods. So, if it sounds good, but it was getting to be late in the season. It was probably October. I figured, there's no way that we can move in here. There was no building. There was, he said there was an old spring down, over the hill there. You'd find the old spring, He told us about the old spring. This was an old moonshine spring, famous in the whole area. It was the best water, It was carved out of stone in described, Yeah, the Federals always used to try to come down here and, shoot them. It's like...
Gunmen.
So we decided what we would do is go back to Oregon for the winter, where, and that we would prepare to come back in the spring the next year and do our little homestead on this place. Now we owned some place. So that's what we did. We went back to we went back to Oregon. And
wait, so how did you get back? You had a driveway car going there.
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
I don't know how. I can't remember.
Train?
I doubt it.
Bus?
It could have been a bus. We could have had a car.
Hitchhike?
Could have hitchhiked.
You don't remember? Okay.
Don't remember. I'm trying to think of anything along the way, that may have happened. And I don't remember anything. I remember nothing about getting back to Oregon. I'm trying to think if we had a car at all.
Maybe you bought an old truck, an old car, and that's how you got around for the month while you lived there.
Don't think so. I have no memory of having a vehicle
Okay.
while I was there, other than borrowing somebody's car for the day to go somewhere hitchhiking or getting rides from one, from hippies going one way to another. I think that's all we did. And maybe we hitchhiked back to Oregon. It's
Okay.
possible. I don't think so.
Okay, so back in Oregon.
So we got back to Oregon. Everybody was happy to see us. But things were a little different. In a way it was funny because I was no longer committed to Magic Forest, right? I was there with a different mission. My mission was preparing for going to West Virginia, and I was only using it as a staging area. And so my allegiances were split, right? And I think everyone sort of knew that. It was a little awkward.
But where would that manifest? What difference does it make?
Well, because I wouldn't do the work that needed to be done at Magic Forest,
Oh.
right? I mean, I'd do my share instead of my share, kind of, as I'd split some wood, but at the same time, I was gathering materials and staging them for the trip to West Virginia. And so I did buy a vehicle for that purpose. And I bought this, in the newspaper I saw somebody mentioned, I think it was in the Trader sort of newspaper, I saw an ad for a 1951 2-ton Chevy truck with a 5-ton power takeoff winch. I said, that sounds like, the kind of vehicle I could use. Hefty truck, old hefty truck. So I went and checked it out. There was some hippies who had that. And so I bought it from them for $100. And drove it back to the farm. And it didn't seem like it was in real good shape. And I wasn't convinced that it was going to really carry the full load and make it across the country. So I went and made friends with a mechanic in town, in Cave Junction. Went to a mechanic shop. And I told him that I bought this truck, and I really wasn't convinced the engine was going to hold out, and I tested the engine. The compression wasn't as good as it should be, and it's an old engine. And asked him, what he thought. And he looked at it and he said, you really ought to rebuild that engine if you really want to do this. I said, well, I've never rebuilt an engine. I don't know. How much it would have cost? They said, well, I'd charge you X number of dollars, $500 to rebuild the engine. I said, I really don't have that, I said, how much would the parts cost? Well, the parts would cost $100. I said, how about if I rebuilt it? I buy the parts and I rebuild it, and you teach me how to do it. I rebuilt it here. I made friends very easily, I guess. I don't know how I was able to do that. But I convinced him somehow, and he said, great, I'll teach you how to rebuild engines. And you could use my shop, my tools, my shop, and any questions you have, I'll show you. So I did that. And completely rebuilt this engine. It worked perfectly. But it was actually a mistake, because I rebuilt this 1951 engine, which was a 216, it was called. The 216 was the last engine that had babbited main bearings, whatever this means, right? So it was an old technique. It was a good old engine, but the bearings were this ancient sort of, from the Middle Ages, literally. It was this you had to pour the bearings, hot metal, and you shape them and to fit. I mean, it was a strange thing, but babbited bearings, as opposed to ball bearings and new engineering. The next year they had the new, the next whole style. And that was called the 235. It was a much better engine. And in a way, I should have thrown away the 216, gone and found the 235 out of a wreck, and just put it in. It would have been a much more logical way to go about this. But I wanted to learn how to rebuild engines anyway. It seemed like fun, so I did that. In the end, it proved itself to be an error in judgment. But it was a number of years later when the engine failed. So I rebuilt the engine and then rebuilt the truck and fixed it up and made sure, everything worked well, and it had this power takeoff unit. It was great. Um, and then I decided that I would build a small prefabricated house that we would be able to put up in West Virginia. That if I could get the truck in somehow to this place, there was this little road, old broken road that we'd walked on. It must go somewhere. I mean, I never went on the road, but it must go somewhere. And so eventually I could figure out how to get into our property. And that was wishful thinking. And, so I decided to build a prefab house. So we had no money, and I was into trying to figure out how to do things for nothing. So I found there was a plywood mill nearby, within 50 miles of where we lived. And the plywood mill would have, normally plywood is made in 4x8 sheets. Well, every once in a while, they probably made it a little bigger, and then the edges are cut off to make it 4x8. Exactly, right? And after they've glued it up, it goes through a press, saw cuts it off. Well, once in a while, the thing comes in twisted, and it gets sawed off, and now it's a rhomboid. It's a parallelogram instead of a rectangle. Right? Every once in a while, the machine screws up and does this. So I didn't realize that, but I went to this mill to find out about buying plywood cheap. And they said, oh, well, we have all these piles of odd ones that are not square, right? That are at an angle. But they're not, they're 4x8, but they're at a funny angle, or less than 4x8. So I said, how much you sell me this? We'll say a whole pile for $100. Give you a big stack of them, as many as you want. So I took my truck, right, and I piled on, $100 worth of plywood and took it back to the farm. So I figured, what I'll do, I was going to make the house modular. So originally it was going to be 4x8 panels. I would take 4x8s, and all the panels would be 4x8. So I figured, yeah, but what's the module that I could make out of these odd-shaped pieces? So I measured what was the smallest one. If I cut it square, what would it be? So it was, instead of 4, it was 3 feet 8 inches by 7 feet 9 inches or something. If I squared it up, cut it off with my saw. So I made them all that size. I just recut all the pieces, made a new modular size instead of 4x8. Mm-hmm. So I had all this wood essentially for free, plywood. And then I wanted to build, sort of make them into boxes, so there'd be panels with 2 sides and something in between to keep them apart and have them insulated. So I went to the motorcycle store, the Yamaha, local Yamaha store, and they had packing crates. They had all these crates there. So they were throwing them away. So I picked up a truckload of crates, and the bikes came packed in styrofoam, shaped like the bike. It fit in there and were in the crated box. That's how they shipped them from Japan. So I took all the styrofoam. So then I took all the styrofoam, and I went on we had a bandsaw, and I sliced the styrofoam boxes. These styrofoam, they were big pieces of styrofoam, and I would slice them up and make them all, 4 inches thick. And then I took the crates and I broke them apart and cut all the pieces so they were all 4 inches wide. And I used them as the structure inside. I took all the pieces of styrofoam and stuffed them inside and put the plywood on the outside and nailed them together and made these panels. So I had a whole stack of modular panels, and so that I could make a building that was about 8 feet wide for the floor. The panels would be on the floor, right? So I made an 8 by 16 foot building, essentially, out of all panels. And a few of the panels, I left the centers and put windows in. salvage some windows and put windows into the panels. So I had a few window panels, and had roof panels and wall panels and floor panels, and so we had that all done. I didn't make a door. That was the only mistake. Forgot to make the door panel. So we had that part done, and then I decided we should, in our homesteading project, we should have bees, and we should have goats. And then we'd have milk, we'd have honey, we'd probably have some chickens, live out on our land, we'd grow a garden, plant some fruit trees, and be self-sufficient. So I decided to make beehives, so we'd have bees. So I took more scrap lumber from something. I found piles of, it was probably the little stuff again, that like I built Judith's odd-shaped building out of these little scraps. And I went and got piles of those in pine ones, because bees like to live in pine boxes. I got those and I cut them on the saw, all to the same size, and made all the frames and boxes and stuff for bees, the right size. And so we had those, and then and I worked on this, for months through the winter and stuff. And the spring came, and I'm finishing it up. And just I can't think. I'm sure I got a lot of other things together. Got my books together and just pieces of stuff. Like,
So there's enough room on the truck to put all these panels plus your stuff and drive across the country?
the truck was, 8 feet wide. It was probably 16 feet long.
Huh.
I stacked them all modular. I built.
You could have built the whole house on the back.
I built.
At 8
I
by
used.
16.
I used them. Some of the panels, I think, for the, for a house on the truck. But then piled the others in there, and then we decided to take 2 of the goats from the farm, 2 of the baby goats. So we had enough space in. I built inside essentially a house, as you're saying, on the back of the truck, and the goats could fit in there, and the beehives, and all this stuff. And eventually we got it all together. It was all, on the truck. Everything we needed. And so the spring came. It was about May, probably April. We left Magic Forest, and headed. And I had rebuilt the engine, done all that stuff over the winter as well. My truck was ready, and I was pretty confident in the truck. It seemed to work pretty well. The only problem is I really had it loaded pretty heavy, and it wasn't real strong. It's this old engine. So we headed, and I remember right away, it was a hot day, one of the first days, and we were climbing in Oregon up this big, long mountain, and I was in the right-hand lane, and then I was like off the driving 10 miles an hour and 5 miles an hour, and I'm in the lowest gear, climbing up, and the temperature was starting to rise. It was a hot day, and I'm watching the temperature go up, and I had to pull over and let it cool down, and then I finally waited until nighttime. I just stayed on the side of the road, waited until it cooled down enough, and climbed over that mountain pass. And we decided on a route, and the route would take us past everyone we knew, sort of, We were gonna take this funny route. And the route took us south. We went down to, I guess we probably visited you guys.
Yeah, I remember.
And you were in...
We were staying with somebody. I remember you visiting us either in Berkeley or somewhere at somebody's house.
Yeah.
For some reason, a normal house.
Yeah.
I don't know whose it was, and I remember your thing parked outside with goats in it, and
right.
We opened up the back and you showed it to us.
Yeah. So
I don't know whose house it was.
Yeah, I don't know. So we stopped and saw you guys, and then we went a little further south, and we stopped at my cousin Fern's house in Palo Alto, or one of those towns, in Silicon Valley.
Didn't your grandmother live there?
She may have been dead already. I don't know.
No.
Or I didn't see her that time.
Oh, she could have been.
I think she
Well,
died
I met
between,
her.
yeah, between
Well,
the last time I saw her and then
okay, right.
I think she'd passed away.
San Jose.
Yeah. But in that whole area, my
Yeah.
aunt Annis lived and her daughter Fern lived, in that area as well. So we stopped at Fern's house, and Fern lived in this very upscale suburban neighborhood, It's a perfect little neighborhood. She had these kids, 5, 6, and 7-year-old, whatever, little kids. And we pulled up with our thing, and we let the goats out, and the goats are running all over the yard and down the neighborhood, and, and the kids were like, like amazed that they'd never met me, I hardly ever saw this Fern. I just got her address and thought I'd stop by. And I remember years and years later, I ran into one of her kids, and it was like one of the most memorable moments of their lives. They could never forget this moment with the goats coming out of the car, out of the truck in there, on their street, and the neighbors. So we stopped there, and then we drove on down to L.A., and we stopped at my brother's house, another one in the valley, right, on a normal residential street in the valley. And we pulled up in front and let the goats out, And then we camped on his front lawn. We set up our tent on his front lawn.
What did you feed the goats?
They just ate the grass.
But when every day you would stop and let them graze?
Yeah. Wherever we were, we stopped on the side of the road and let them out. And they'd eat.
And they pooped inside the truck, and you cleaned it out?
Yeah, probably.
It's clean. It's
not bad.
Pellets.
Yeah. They were nice. They were sweet.
Did you have like hay in the back or anything for them to lie on?
We probably got a little hay along the way. Stuff.
And you slept also in the... Oh, you slept in a tent outside usually? On the side of the road?
Yeah, generally we slept in a tent.
It was nice weather. It was spring.
Yeah, spring.
Okay.
And we headed south. It was warm. Dry, warm. And it was just so funny, the scene. It was like, the Okies going the other way, right? We're heading from where the Okies went back. And in the right vehicle even, it looked like, the... Tom Joad image from Grapes of Wrath, right? In some old broken down truck and traveling across the country. Slowly. The truck didn't go fast. It just plodded along. My brother was like blown away, and his daughter, was there. She was like, wild scene. And then we drove to Albuquerque. And Shoshana had a friend in Albuquerque. We stopped and hung out with her for a couple of days, and then we went to the farm in Tennessee, to Gaskin's farm in Tennessee, and we stopped with our thing there, and we knew somebody who had moved there, and we wanted to visit them on the way. It was just, a way of stopping and having something to do. Set little goals each day where we drive to. It was a slow trip cross country. This was not my 36-hour trip. It was more like a 3-week excursion cross country this time. And
anything happen at the farm?
At the farm, it was an interesting thing because the farm was going through a hard time in that Stephen Gaskin had been arrested, was in jail, and there was this whole thing, and this Supreme Court case, and they were fairly paranoid about people. It was like locked, they had big fence. You had to go through their guardhouse, and you had to be interrogated, And the question they asked us was, were we married? That's what they really wanted to know. Were we married? I said, well, no, we have sort of, we're a team, we're partners, yeah, no, are you married? Did you have a wedding? I said, no, we just, we're together, Shoshana and I. And I said, well, we don't approve of that. We can't let people who aren't married come in here and visit. We came to see our friends, our crazy friends who, who live here. We didn't, we're not getting married here, guys, And eventually, they called around, they had security, and they finally agreed that we could go see these friends of ours, but somebody had to come with us and mind us, make sure we didn't, indoctrinate them into something bad. It was really strange. So we stayed for a little while and got out of there. And got to West Virginia. And we stopped at the island of the Red Hood probably, and said hi, we're back. And tried to figure out where our place was, and so we sort of had an idea, and they said, oh, the way you would get to that is you'd go up. In the meantime, between when we had left, somebody had moved in not too far from us, at the top of the mountain. And so it was this road that went in from the top of the mountain that went all the way to the bottom of the mountain. It was this old road from when people actually lived in this hollow. There had been this old road that went down there, this old wagon road that went down there back in the 1930s. Nobody used it much. But they told us that this guy, Kenny, lived right near the top of the road. He had bought a place up at the top.
What was his last name?
Kenny Milrod. We should go see Kenny Milrod, and he'd show us, where the road is. So we went and saw Kenny Milrod, and Kenny had another friend there who was building a little house right next to him. So he's kind of a partner. They bought this land together. And his name was Steve. I don't know. He was a Jewish kid. Eisenstein, Eisman, something, one of these. Anyway, so he was there. So we pulled in at Kenny's place, and Kenny had this big dome he had built. And we'd also, on the back of our trailer, we had the dome. I had disassembled the dome at the farm and taken all the parts, and I was going to put up the dome. I thought I could put up the dome quickly, in a day or so. I could put up the dome, we'd have a space to live in while we put the rest of the stuff together, and, I was kind of staging how we would do this. There's something that doesn't make sense, time-wise. Because I thought it was spring when we got there, but the house didn't go up. And we didn't have the house together until almost winter. Well, it was right after, it was right after Pesach. So when's Pesach?
Spring.
Spring, right? Yeah, so it was spring. Okay. Fine, it was spring. It made sense. But I'll tell you why it didn't make sense. But so we're in West Virginia. We're at Kenny Milrod. He says, yeah, I think, you go down this road past his house, So we go down. And
in the truck?
No, we walk.
Oh, you walk.
We just had to walk. We're going to go find the place first.
Right.
We want to make sure we find the place we're looking, that we bought. And we go looking, and we can't find it. We can't figure out where the hell this thing was that he showed us. We walk all over the place for hours looking. We can't find anything that looks like the thing he showed us. So we called Homer. Homer. He had a great name. Anyway, we called Homer. Might have been Kales. Homer Kales. Something like that. Kales was a common name up there. I don't remember if he was a Kales. Called Homer and said, Homer, we're back. Shoshana and Albie, we're back. And we can't figure out where this place is that we bought. Could you help us? So he came down and he walked around. And he said, no, I think it's further down here. And he couldn't find it, but we kept walking and eventually we found it. And it took us a long time to figure out where this place was. And so we found the place. And we looked at the road between where we were at Kenny's and where this was, and the road was rough. I mean, there were places where there was no road. It was just washed out and stuff. I said, well, I've driven this truck in bad places. What the hell? And it had just rained, and the whole road was muddy. It was, So I started down the road on this thing, and pretty soon I was stuck in mud up to the fenders. I was like buried in mud. We couldn't get anywhere. We were stuck. Didn't have four-wheel drive, unfortunately. So I was stuck in this thing. I couldn't figure out what I was going to do. And so Kenny called a friend of his. And this friend comes with this big tractor, big farm tractor, huge wheels, big. And he somehow gets around the tree, pulls the truck back a little and gets around the truck somehow and gets in front. And he pulls us all the way down to the land. There was no way to get down this road with the truck that we had, and loaded. I mean, it was loaded to the hilt. So he pulled us all the way down to where the old broken log cabin was, and we thanked him profusely, and he just took off. And we were there. I mean, it was like, phew, we made it. And there it is. We have our entire lives on this truck. It's there. We have our new land. What are we gonna do? And it was getting dark. We just sort of camped out, let the goats out, and camped out in the promised land. So the next day I got started right away and started unloading and built where we tied the goats up. Started by tying them up to trees and letting them eat and taking them on walks and unloading all the stuff. And I set up the dome, and we had built a ripstop cover for the dome, I think. Yeah, we built this. Shoshana had sewed together all the ripstop that I got from Sierra Designs back at the farm. That was her project during the winter, and she made this. I gave her the patterns for what sizes each triangle had to be, and she sewed up a cover for the dome out of multicolored, this multicolored dome cover. And so we set up the dome, and we covered the dome, and we would sleep. We had a place to stay at least. It was on the dirt. It was just, found a little grassy area, let the goats eat it down a little. And unloaded the stuff, and I had to build sort of a foundation for the house because there was no level land anywhere. So I had to build some pillars and stuff. And just got working on clearing we got the truck unloaded completely. Then I used the truck because it had this 5-ton power takeoff winch. It was running off the engine. It was an incredibly powerful winch. So I had chains and this 3/8 or half-inch cable, steel cable coming off of the winch, and I would chain the truck to a big tree, and then I would tie the cable to another tree, and I'd run the winch and pull the trees right out of the ground. The tree that I wanted to plant. I cleared this garden, the old garden, by just pulling the trees right out of the ground. It was amazing. And then we had all this firewood, and then we didn't have a chainsaw, because we cut all the firewood by hand. I learned from Roland, how to be strong. And I cut up all this firewood and stack it away. And it was pretty intense. Then we started meeting people, and we met Don Drummer again. It turned out Don Drummer was a fiddler, or he was a guitar player, and his wife was a fiddler, and they were building a stone house not too far away. We got to be friends with them, played some music, and just got into the community. People liked us a lot. People started coming down, visiting and helping out a little bit. And then we met Mark Blumenstein. There was some kind of gathering, community gathering for something, for the solstice or something. I don't know what, for some. And so we met a lot of people, and then we told everyone, we decided that there were a lot of Jews. Most of the people were Jewish that we met, the hippies. Right? So we said, why don't we have Passover Seder at our place? And we didn't have a place. So, but I thought we'd have it in the dome. Right? People could walk in. It was, 3.5 mile walk in from Kenny's house to walk 3.5 miles from Kenny's house. And we'd walk in. I used to run that 3.5 miles. It became very short, it seemed. It got shorter and shorter. It's interesting. I think about that I used to run. I was in such good shape. I would run that 3.5 miles without even thinking about it. And I'd run it through the woods, through shortcuts. I wouldn't even be on the road. And I could do it in the dark, with no light. I could run through the woods as fast as I could run. I just would trust. At some point, I felt so comfortable about it that I'd just almost close my eyes and run. I never ran into a tree. I never tripped and everything. It was just weird. You'd see this light sparkling, a starlight or a little moonlight on things, and just run through the woods. So we set this date. On Passover we would have this thing. People say, "Oh, great, we'll bring in food and we'll do." Everybody was all excited. So then it was still early. So what part of the year would?
April, May.
Then we must have gotten there
March,
early.
April, May.
We would have gotten there even earlier. Maybe we got there earlier. Because, it must have been earlier that we arrived. Because one day, Jim Shames and Heidi, and I guess Jim Shames and Heidi, showed up at our door one afternoon. It was so strange. They were coming, they had been visiting in New York, apparently, and they had a drive-away car. They got a drive-away car to drive back to Oregon. They decided to stop by and see us en route. It was a little out of the way, but they decided to do that. And they showed up unannounced. We were very excited to see them. And I had just finished putting together the house. Okay? So we'd been there for a month or so. So we must have been there in March to start with. And I'd just gotten the house together, but I didn't have the door, because I didn't have a door. So we just kind of put a piece of plywood where the door would be and tied it shut to keep the goats out. The goats were outside. And we decided that we would stay in the house that night for the first time, okay, instead of the dome. And Jim and Heidi were there, and I built a loft and a little area underneath the loft which had another little bed in it, and a study area and bookshelves, and and we had a little potbelly stove that we found somewhere, a very teeny little potbelly stove to fit in this little. It was very cozy. I loved this. That little space was so cozy. And so we were there. We went to sleep. And it had to be March or April, or May, by this point. And we woke up in the morning, and there was 2 or 3 feet of snow outside during the night. You didn't hear it, nothing, just quiet. We walked, this place is a winter wonderland, spring. What kind of craziness? Spring. The snow was up to our waist. We were stuck down there. We went outside and we looked at the dome. The dome had collapsed. The structure was okay, but the ripstop had all torn. Couldn't stand the weight of 3 feet of snow, and it all just shredded.
How about the goats?
The goats were fine. They were prancing around in the snow. Actually, I think they hid underneath the building. There was a way for them to get under, and I think that they climbed under the building that night and were under there. I heard them. I remember during the night hearing them kind of, moving around and grunting under the building. So we got up the next day. We were in shock, and we saw this dome. I mean, we would have been sleeping in the dome, right? That night. This is the first time we didn't sleep in the dome. And we would have been underneath the 3 feet of snow. So we were a little bummed out about the dome, but it was pretty funny. But Jim needed to get this car back to Oregon. I mean, I only had a certain number of days to drive it across the country. Now we're stuck with this. The car was up at Kenny's house, which had more snow. He was even higher than we were. He's another 200 feet above us in elevation, 100 feet above us in elevation. And so we got up to Kenny's, and Kenny's was totally snowed in. The car was there. So we walked out, and Jim Jim was kind of a little guy, and not, the strongest kind of guy. So I led the way and broke the trail through this heavy snow, make a trail so they could walk behind me up to Kenny's. It was exhausting. We got there, and it's probably because we couldn't get his car out. There's no way to get it was uphill to get out of Kenny's place. So we walked up to the road, and the road had been plowed by the state. So we got a ride down to town, bought a set of chains that would fit the car that they were driving. Got back, put the chains on, pushed the thing, chains, got it at the thing, and they went home to Oregon. And then we took the Dome, and I remember Shoshana went, and we had lots of ripstop with us. That was in our supplies as well. I'd taken all extra ripstop for other projects that we might need. And she wound up rebuilding the whole dome piece, cutting out all the torn pieces and sewing new ones in. She spent days and days working on that thing. It's this huge thing, trying to work it through a regular little sewing machine, because it's a 20-foot dome. It's a 50-foot piece of ripstop. So we got the dome done just in time for Passover Seder, and put it back together, and people came. The people helped us put it up, I remember. We re-erected the whole thing, had our Seder in there. It was very cute. Everyone that attended always remembers that. It was a very memorable thing.
Do you remember who was there or how many people?
Yeah. So Marky and his wife, and Alan and Carolyn, and they had a little baby or something, and they carried them in. And there may have been one more couple, maybe Stephen and Stephanie.
Kenny wasn't Jewish?
Kenny was Jewish. Yes, he probably was there.
Was.
He was probably there. His wife wasn't Jewish,
right.
But he was Jewish. I'm sure they were there.
Right.
So it was probably 10 people altogether. It was very cute.
Did you have matzah?
We had matzah.
Where'd you get matzah from?
Who knows? Everybody brought something.
Uh-huh.
They all cooked the things. We had simses or whatever, and matzah, and and we had a little Seder plate, and
did you have Haggadahs?
we had Haggadahs. Somebody found Haggadahs, and we did a regular Seder. It was very cute. In the promised land. It's like, settlers.
Mm-hmm.
And we sang, Echalutz Laman Avodah. The pioneers, right? We did all that. It was so funny. And but that snow was so unexpected. We thought it was going to be summer, spring.
Now, I remember when we visited that you had this big space and then a little thing.
Right.
Was the little thing the
original?
The original, that was 8x16?
Yeah.
The one that Noah and I slept
Yeah.
in. That's 8x16?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
It was tiny.
Bigger, yeah. But it was,
Uh-huh.
we were very
It was a little
comfortable.
box.
Huh?
It was a little box.
It was a little box.
Right.
But it was enough.
Right.
And I had it
Right.
built so that it was we had each had our little desk. We each,
Right.
we had books and a place to write, a place
Right,
to
I
sleep,
remember.
a place to
Right.
take a chair. It was. I felt like Thoreau. I felt like we were in the Thoreau mode. Absolutely minimal. We would write. We'd just sit all day and read and write and clear land, and at night we'd sit with a kerosene lamp and candles and do that and go to bed and live by the cycle of the sun, pretty much. Very peaceful. So quiet. Anyway, that was
the end of the day.
Okay.
Maybe should you tell a little bit about Jim Shames before this? Like back, didn't you have some interest in midwifery? And didn't he start a little clinic and you tell that? We talked. You talked about one birth back in Talsalson.
Then we didn't talk about the clinic.
You didn't talk about the clinic at all.
Okay.
The first clinic.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
That will lead nicely to the birth in West Virginia.
Right.
So